Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the Joe Rogan controversy of early 2022? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background in this case, then I'll offer my analysis. Joe Rogan is the host of an incredibly popular podcast called the Joe Rogan Experience. He launched the podcast in December of 2009. In May of 2020, he signed a multi-year deal with Spotify, reportedly worth $100 million. Rogan controls what guests come on the show. He controls the topics. Spotify simply hosts the show on their platform. The format of Rogan's podcast is pretty straightforward. He interviews one or two guests on the show for a few hours. It's like a casual conversation. Sometimes Rogan is knowledgeable about the subject matter, like if he's talking about comedy or mixed martial arts. Other times Rogan really has no idea about the topic, like COVID, vaccination, mental health, and substance use. Rogan is typically weak on topics that involve science. On the topic of COVID-19, Rogan has interviewed a few controversial guests, spread misinformation, and made statements that have attracted negative attention. A few examples. In April of 2021, he said he believed that young and healthy people should not get vaccinated against COVID. Later, he distanced himself from his own comments, saying that he is not a respected source of information. In August of 2021, he suggested that society is moving one step closer to dictatorship due to discussions about vaccine passports. After testing positive for COVID-19 in September of 2021, Rogan shared that he was using a number of unapproved treatments like ivermectin and vitamins. In January of 2022, 270 PhDs, MDs, students, and other professionals wrote an open letter about Rogan to Spotify. They asked for a clear policy to moderate misinformation on the platform. They did not call for Rogan to be fired or anything like that. The group was particularly concerned about the episode featuring Robert Malone, who is a biochemist and physician responsible for promoting COVID-19 misinformation and conspiracy theories. Malone specifically mentioned something he referred to as mass formation psychosis, a fictitious mental condition that he apparently just made up to fit in with his conspiracy theories. Later that same month, Spotify removed the music of Neil Young and Joni Mitchell after they protested about the Joe Rogan Experience. So they wanted their music removed from Spotify. Rogan responded by saying that he would try harder to offer more balanced views on his podcast. He said that he never tried to do anything with his podcast other than talk to people. He agreed with a plan by Spotify to put a disclaimer at the start of controversial episodes. In February of 2022, as the COVID-19 misinformation scandal continued, Rogan was hit with another scandal. A compilation of clips from his podcast was published. It contains instances where he was using a racial slur typically used against black people. Rogan apologized for using the word and said he was not a racist. He was using the word as it was quoted by others, not directing it toward specific people. During a stand-up comedy routine on February 8, 2022, Rogan said he had not used the word in years. He also took some time to address the COVID-19 misinformation scandal. He said that he doesn't believe anyone should reasonably take him seriously, despite having purported experts on his show. He said, "I talk blank for a living. That's why this is so baffling to me. If you are taking vaccine advice from me, is that really my fault?" He continued by saying, "If you want my advice, don't take my advice." Spotify removed at least 113 episodes of Rogan's podcast, in part to eliminate offensive content. The platform revealed specific rules that govern when they will take action against creators for spreading misinformation. There are only two categories. They will remove content that falsely asserts that the COVID-19 pandemic is a hoax, and they will remove content that encourages people to get infected deliberately. Spotify has decided to stick with Joe Rogan. His show isn't going anywhere, although this is not due to a lack of interest from competing platforms. For example, the Canadian platform Rumble offered to match Spotify's deal of $100 million. Rogan has indicated he intends to stay with Spotify. Now moving to my analysis. This Joe Rogan controversy is essentially about the limits of free speech. It has opened the debate about what speech should be allowed or tolerated. What are the responsibilities of a platform like Spotify? What should they do about misinformation and offensive content? Are the actions they have taken so far sufficient? Should they have done nothing? Should they do more? To provide some background, I will first look at the nature of Joe Rogan and then the expectations of his audience. What is Joe Rogan's intent? Rogan positions himself as a curious bystander, an uninformed interviewer who just wants to have a conversation with scientists, athletes, entertainers, celebrities, conspiracy theorists, and a variety of other people. He's just sitting back and seeing what happens. He doesn't really understand the issues, and he's looking for information. Is this true? Is Rogan some type of hapless interviewer who doesn't really try to promote misinformation? Or does Rogan have an agenda, which he actively promotes? In my opinion, with some guests, Rogan does behave as a curious, uninformed bystander. However, with other guests, he is more forceful about promoting his point of view. Sometimes his point of view makes sense. Other times, like with COVID-19 issues, his track record is not good. Rogan is not fair and balanced, in my opinion. Rather, he injects a good deal of bias into his podcast. Now moving to the expectations of his audience. Rogan has never represented his show as a source of accurate information. Lately, he has gone out of his way to convince people they should never listen to a word he says. Rogan is attempting to hide behind this idea that he is just having a discussion. In a way, he's kind of implying that people who assume that he's revealing factual information are not good at critical thinking. It was their mistake to watch his podcast with the intent of collecting any accurate and useful knowledge. Rogan promotes misinformation and then blames his audience for believing him. He sits back and implies that he is not responsible for what he says, even though he's exceptionally popular and he knows that people are listening to him. In my opinion, Rogan does have a responsibility to be clear about when his opinion is being expressed as opposed to a fact. He promotes misinformation with authority that he does not possess, and he invites guests on the show who promote nonsense while pretending it's factual. This promotion of misinformation is not accidental. Rogan didn't stumble upon people like Robert Malone roaming around the outside of the studio or something and invite them in spontaneously. Rogan selects guests who promote his point of view, who verify what he already believes, and, one could argue, what he wants other people to believe. Moving to the next question, what should be done in this situation? Like, what should Spotify do? There's no easy answer to this question, but based on information that's available right now, here's my opinion. I think that they should put a disclaimer on the podcast and fact check the podcast. They should make the results of the fact check available to the audience. Other than that, they should let Joe Rogan interview people like he has been doing. The key to reducing harm from misinformation is not censorship, rather teaching people about information literacy. If Rogan was to be censored, another person just like him would be all too eager to take his place. Also, for those in his audience who are paranoid, this would only strengthen their beliefs. Like this would verify that there's some type of conspiracy to suppress information. It takes two sides for misinformation to create harm, the transmitter and the receiver. All the focus on this case has been on the transmitter. But really, Joe Rogan has simply revealed the weaknesses in the quality of the receivers. Potentially, millions of people believe the false statements promoted on his show. They don't have the research and information literacy skills to accurately evaluate sources of information. They are in a vulnerable position, and Rogan is right there to take advantage of them. Many people who believe Rogan already made up their minds before they watched his podcast. They sought him out because he was promoting the type of misinformation they wanted to hear. They were looking to validate their feelings of paranoia and distrust. I don't think Rogan is ever going to lose his audience as long as he keeps promoting misinformation. He has proven that he is too big to cancel. The only way Rogan will lose his audience is by being fair and balanced and promoting information based on science. There is little danger of that happening. As far as the freedom of speech issue, the First Amendment provides protection of free speech from the government, not from private citizens. All speech is permitted except that which would create a clear and present danger, like the classic analogy of yelling fire in a crowded movie theater. The public gets to decide what they listen to. This Joe Rogan controversy has proven that the system works. People who like Rogan can listen to him. People who do not like him don't have to. Efforts to cancel Rogan have failed, as well they should have. Moving to the next question. If suppressing free speech is not the answer, how can society combat misinformation? I think the answer is to promote the correct information and identify the misinformation as harmful. To add the voice of accuracy to the conversation. Cancel culture is not the way to defeat misinformation. It only increases attention on people like Joe Rogan. Now moving to my final thoughts. This case has placed a lot of emphasis on rights, what people can technically say and what they cannot technically say. This overshadows important topics like morality and decency. Just because somebody can technically say something doesn't mean they should. Rogan is allowed to promote misinformation, but is that the right or decent thing to do? Is it wise to listen to someone who cannot be courteous enough to tell people the truth? Rogan has a way of finding two sides to every story, but not every issue has two sides. Some topics are not legitimately part of a political dialogue. I imagine a scenario where a woman accidentally walks into the middle of a roadway. A tractor trailer is barreling down the road toward her. 100 people on the side of the road yell out, "Get out of the road." On the other side stands Joe Rogan. He looks at her and says, "Well, let's look at the other side of this. Would getting hit by a truck be so bad?" Rogan is not admirable or a hero for finding and promoting misinformation. His recklessness does not make him equivalent to a scientist. Simply exercising a right doesn't make a person moral, decent, or kind. Rogan's advice to the world was not to take his advice. I am compelled to agree with him on this point. Those are my thoughts on the Joe Rogan controversy of early 2022. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.